Callum Walker, what is going on, brother? We finally
What
got
is
there.
happening? We got there. We got there. Audio issues. But now look at the tech space and the setup that we've got. Like, look at that.
Going on? Where would you get it? Where would you get it? Just acts like Canva, you know?
There you
Friend,
go, Canva.
we will tell you how to do this here for a non-disclosed fee. We'll tell you how to get
Yes.
this set up and all going on.
Yeah, but we'll get someone else to teach it because I'm not sure I can be the one to teach you how to do it. So, yeah.
Callum, I'm going to going to dive straight in at the deep end here because I know, well, you and I have talked about. I know you're a fan of ketogenic style diets,
Yeah.
right? And I also know that you prioritize sunlight on the eyes in terms of sleep and also sunrise, sunset, the different sort of photons that your eyes pick up in those times of the
Mm.
day, sleep cycle. I have heard you talk about fasting in terms of the health benefits, adrenal response, cognition. I've heard you talk about quite a substantial amount of those things. And so
Yeah.
what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to pick your brain around the carnivore diet first and foremost. And so yeah, where does
Okay.
that to what's the difference between ketogenic diet, carnivore diet?
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I want to hear you talk around is the types of protein that we take on board. You know, not us,
Yeah.
but in plants, as in like what is good quality, what's not good quality, how does this apply to vegetarians, vegans, so on and so forth.
Mm.
But there are obviously some of the things that some of our coaches are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. You know, they're going to get people to come to them and say, what about this type of diet? What about that type of diet? What about me? I'm a vegetarian. I've got this, so and so condition, and how do we deal with that? And so I would like to hear your thoughts around some of those, and also your thoughts around some updates to nutrition and what has changed in you of late. Is there anything in your mind that has changed into some of the updates? You know, some of the new science. Is there new science? Because I've actually heard, there's quite a few influencers now. I know the guy Paul Saladino, isn't that his name?
Hmm.
Yeah, kind of, flipped. He's gone from the carnivore MD, wasn't that it?
Yeah.
Almost coming out and saying, well, the vast majority of people can't live this way. And he's made basically a complete U-turn, right? So I would like to hear your thoughts on some of that. But let's start with the carnivore diet as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And so what are some of the mistakes that people are making when it comes to the carnivore diet, and how can people use that more optimally?
Oh, so can I ask first of all? So
Yeah.
I'm going to answer your question with a question. Why the intrigue for yourself?
Um, I think the way your reticular activating system opens up to certain things. And having had conversations with you and I think one of the last conversations that you and I had was, I remember saying about when I was doing this
Meat and nuts?
meat and nuts breakfast, but then it was like carb backloading. So I would have all of my carbs at the end of the day, and next thing you know, I'm out cold, so I'm asleep. Like after I take that amount on, and it really helps with my sleep cycle because as soon as I eat a big plate of carbs, I'm out. However, if I was to, go total carnivore or whatever, and I have done this, I've tried tested this in the past, I would actually have real trouble sleeping.
Mm.
Uh, so I remembered we had that conversation, and then you were talking to me about some of the details around. And I tell you what piqued my interest more was when you talked about the neurological response, so neural energy. And I was like, that is interesting. And I was aware of it slightly before, not with proteins and fats, but with fasting. So I know we get like neural energy in that regard. Adrenaline goes up, but I never really thought about it in terms of what macronutrients do that. and you kind of piqued my attention. And so off the back of that, then I started, like seeing, some people using a carnivore style diet, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, I can see why.
Hmm.
I can see why, because there's no disputing the fact that you do get, you're better cognitively, even in terms of your general energy, you're going to be better. Like if you waking up and have three bowls of porridge, you're ready to go back to
Mm,
bed, right?
absolutely.
That's generally what piqued my interest, and just seeing more people doing it. I'm just kind of like, yeah, I can see why, but I can also see how some people could make it not really sustainable as well because they might make certain mistakes in it or whatever.
Yeah, so you've hit on some really important points. Do you know what the most? I think there's two important points here that actually have nothing to do with the science of it. Which I think, first of all, is that if you look at what you're displaying, is a consistent open mind to new concepts. And I think that, especially in the industry, and I'm not fully sure as to why it is. And obviously, it's not just specific to the fitness industry, but for coaches listening to this, the fitness industry is insanely closed-minded. And I guess that's us as a human race in general and a population that, we don't like change. We don't like things that, alter the status quo. We don't like things that are, yeah, going to result in us having to do things differently and effectively kind of make effort in order to change. I think that one thing I found, and look, I've slipped into this mentality multiple times, especially in my early days, and I still catch myself out with it when new concepts are put my way. So it's like, for example, when I used to have clients, they'd come to me with this latest and greatest supplement. Like, oh, I've heard about this supplement. What do you think? Now, the problem was, what would happen would be my immediate reaction straight away would be, no, it's a bag of shit, doesn't do anything. Don't waste your
Mm.
money. But the only reason that I actually would say that was because I knew absolutely nothing about it. So I knew absolutely nothing about it. And for me to articulate, I actually have no idea. It threatened my ego. And it threatened my ego because there was a fear of potentially being found out for going, well, you should know about this. So, as a protection mechanism, I would automatically go, I'm just going to dismiss it and put it out of the way. The problem was that stunted my growth and it stopped me. And yeah, don't get me wrong, a lot of the supplements that they did, say, hey, what do you think? They were a waste of time. But it's like when I first got introduced to the ketogenic diet, I was introduced, like, I feel like now people are starting to kind of talk about insulin. I was introduced to this and I started learning about it 10 years ago. And when I first was taught it in universities, it was taught as a fad diet. So then, because of the conditioning, is interesting because just before this, we were talking about it trickles down from the top. That again, because at university it was taught just calories in, calories out, carbs are king, ketogenic is I internalized that as my own belief. But it's interesting that I never actually questioned the stability of that belief and being like, well, hold on, let me just get it from a different point of view. So I think, first of all, within that, just as a coach, always check yourself as to, am I dismissing this thing because I have solid foundation that it isn't beneficial? Or am I dismissing this thing because I'm actually scared that I don't know anything about it? So I remember I had a coach who used to really bang the drum of a ketogenic diet, being like, don't do it, it's a fad, it's a fad, it's a fad. And I remember he then wanted to come onto one of my courses. And he basically he said, I'm always really anti-keto and all this sort of stuff. And I then said to him, I was just like, look, can you name the three ketones? And he goes, I didn't even know there were three. I don't even know what a ketone is. And I didn't want to kind of put him down, but I was kind of teaching him by saying, like, Chief, you are dismissing something that can help immensely, and not even with your clients, but you're dismissing something that mentally for yourself can change immensely. And it's like, when I hear people talk about these things as a fad, whether it's carnivore, whether it's ketogenic diet, I think it's just incredibly unwise. And it's also really silly because you look at a fad is something that legitimately has no scientific evidence behind it. I got into ketogenic diet because through epilepsy. Yeah. So I got into ketogenic diets through epilepsy, where you legitimately, it's interesting with ketogenic diet, where it first really came, it came into things, into the world about, just over 100 years ago, and was originally used as medication for children with epilepsy, because children would have 50, 60 seizures a day, and then simply by going ketogenic, they would go to have one to two a week. So to dismiss something as a fad there when you have something that profoundly alters someone's livelihood is unwise. It's not wise to do that. So again, like we always have to, I think, just take things with a pinch of salt. And always, whenever you're introduced to new concepts, automatic response is always going to be, I don't know anything about it. So because that, I'm going to reject that. Because also, like naturally, you look at us as human beings, we always kind of fight against things that require effort. And in order to understand a ketogenic diet, in order to understand a carnivore diet, for example, it would require effort for you to have to change your old concepts and beliefs and potentially take on something new. And off the back of that, you're always going to get hit with that internal resistance. So there's that part there, the fact that, automatically you very much enter things with a very open mind and being like, right, I'm actually going to come to my own conclusion here off the back of the evidence that's presented to me through me, for example, if I'm talking to you about ketogenic diet, what I don't want you to do is just take that solely as like, it's fact because it's come from Callum. It more being like, okay, you've presented a new case here and a different way of looking at things. And you know what? In certain aspects, that really makes sense. What I'm going to do is take that information from there, and then come up with my own belief structure off the back of what I've been experienced and what I've been exposed to. And I think as a coach, that's what separates you. That's what makes you great. That's what makes you good. And that also by adopting. So for myself, I originally qualified as a performance nutritionist, specializing in working with athletes. But because I've opened up my eyes to certain tools, I can work with a greater variety of individuals. That's not to say that my business is centered around that. But if someone came to me with type 2 diabetes, I could work with them to reverse that type 2 diabetes. Someone came to me with menopause, I could work with them to help them go through it because I've opened my eyes to new concepts. So otherwise, it makes you one dimensional. And right now, within the coaching industry, I would say 90% of coaches I see are one dimensional. They just bang the drum from a nutritional point of view. It's just calories in, calories out. Whether it's the type of coaching that they're doing, it's just solely an external body transformation that,
Yeah.
you're going to have people stick around for 90 days and then they're going to fucking leave you. So again, it's almost kind of about, and I think this is why me and you connect so well. The type of coaching that you're doing is about legitimate, yeah, the external transformation, but an internal transformation that you can make for someone where you can legitimately change their life. And I think you come to the second part with all of these concepts that you're talking about. If you notice straight away, nothing is to do with fat loss there. Nothing is to do with like having like, six pack abs. And that's the whole point of like, the ECA certification. It's not about turning you into someone who can just be like a bodybuilding prep coach. It's about being a legitimate coach of substance that both me and you really like. It's interesting when, you came over to Birmingham and you were coaching me and Sam on all of these things. Where it was just so clear that both of our philosophies are on the same level, but not necessarily just in terms of what we're teaching, but the whole point of going, we've got to tackle the whatever problem our client is actually hitting from the root source, because otherwise what we're doing is we're just papering over the cracks. That if someone's
Yeah.
shoulder is fucked, then you're just gonna, you're gonna build hypertrophy over that
Dysfunction.
challenge.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's the same from a nutritional point of view.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if I kind of then look at like all of those concepts you've spoken about, and I think that this is the direction in terms of what personally I think what the Gen Pop are really kind of starting to kind of get towards. I think people are sick of, yeah, you will always have people who want to go to a coach to look better, but I think that with the demands that society is beginning to place on us from a mental and emotional perspective of being pulled in more and more directions and being expected to be here, 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 and here. I think that really the secret is about being able to position yourself as someone, as a coach who can help someone deal with the psychological and the emotional challenges that life throws at you, and using physical activity, using nutrition, using things like cold water therapy, sauna, all of those things, using those as a vehicle to allow someone to really be able to thrive through life so they can become the best father, mother, daughter, brother, sister, that they possibly can. And I think if you want to position yourself as as a coach that stands out, that's what people want. And also,
Mm,
you look at it, we look at it from a business perspective. I always look at this, and I always say this to all of my coaches that I train: fat loss is finite, whereas performance is infinite. And by
mm.
performance, I don't just mean performance from an athletic point of view. I'm on about performance from a cognition perspective, an emotional perspective. You can always train better. You can always eat better. You can always sleep better. You can always have more energy. Whereas with fat loss, you know, once someone loses 3 stone, like, what are they going to keep paying you 150 quid a month for to do the same thing? They're not.
End game.
Exactly. There is an end game. Whereas if you look at the next part, if you look at from a business point of view, I kind of talk a lot about the retention side of things. It's not a result that people are searching for, it's progression. They want a reason to actually go, well, why am I going to stay with you for the next month? How am I going to keep growing? And if you just solely limit yourself to my nutritional approach is just calorie target protein goal, you're going to have a retention problem because they don't need you anymore once they've done it. Whereas if you can position yourself as someone else, and you do that through adopting and opening your eyes, like, I'm a big cold water therapy guy. When I first came into contact with cold water therapy, I thought it was stupid because I'd heard of some guy called Wim Hof, who's some hippie. And I'm like, I'm not going to fuck, my ego was there going, I'm not going to fucking listen to this guy. I'm not going to listen to this guy. Like, what the fuck? And then do you know
Well,
what I
well,
did?
he only swam in the coldest waters on
Yeah,
earth.
yeah,
Fucking dude.
he's only climbed up Everest in his shorts. What does this bloke know? Like, but you look at that, okay, and that's the thing that you make up your mind on these things by applying it to yourself. And you look at Wim Hof, like, the reason why he speaks with such certainty and conviction, and why I do believe him, is because he's done it. Like, for a bloke to swim underwater in
Fucking
those temperatures, yeah, and he goes, you listen to him tell the stories like, yeah, my retina froze. I couldn't see, and I couldn't. Have you heard that? So he was under, his retina froze, so he couldn't see. So he actually swam past his air hole, and
oh
then he had
yeah.
to time. So I think the point I'm coming out with that is that, like, I say to every one of my coaches that I train, before you go and apply this to your clients, apply it to yourself, because you will understand what I'm talking about. So it's like me when I first jumped into a cold water, like into an ice bath. I was like, this is stupid, blah, 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 blah. And then I did it, and then I went, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
I get it. And it's the same with the ketogenic diet, it's the same with the carnivore. But then also, you've hit on some important points there. Like, my problem with a carnivore diet, or a keto, or even being ketogenic for a long time, is I'm excessively stimulated. Like,
Mm.
it's too much, and like my sleep
Is that
struggles.
for someone with ADHD, is that is that a byproduct of that? Whereas if
But
someone's
that's a
possibly.
really interesting. That's a really interesting. And you know what? It actually makes a lot of sense because and it's cool because you always kind of like learn new things here, and that there is just something I've never actually considered, but makes so much sense. You look at someone with ADHD, they have baseline levels of dopamine that are low, so you have low levels of dopamine. So what happens is that naturally you go searching for activities that will give you that dopamine, but then you fall into the category of being excessively stimulated.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, again, everyone responds differently. You look at a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet. Some people actually really kind of articulate that. I feel a lot more calm when on a ketogenic diet. I feel a lot more calm when on a carnivore. Where for me, I feel excessively stimulated, and I
Hmm.
feel it is too much. And too much by doing it for a long period of time. And I then come back to, like, that's really, really interesting because you would be excessively increasing levels of adrenaline, levels of dopamine as well. And you then go and, if I then continue my routine, it's interesting. If I'm fully ketogenic, or if I have gone through like a little carnivore stint, I don't need caffeine, or I don't really kind of need the caffeine, so to speak. And it's interesting that probably a mistake I've made when I have been excessively stimulated is I've continued my old routine while actually being in a different physiology. So
Mm,
it's really interesting in that sense. And I think that the point that I kind of come to with these is that all of these diets are specific tools that will put you in a specific physiological state that you would like to be in. So it's
yeah.
like again, we spoke about when you're low carb, the amount of adrenaline, which is effectively almost kind of like that neural energy that will kind of drive you. The amount of adrenaline is directly correlated to the amount of sugar in your blood. So when the sugar is low, which is why intermittent fasting drives up adrenaline production and makes you feel more alert and aware, adrenaline increases. But when it's your blood sugar is high, adrenaline goes down. So effectively, what I can do is when I want to be awake, alert, and aware, I keep my blood sugar low and I go low carb, or ultimately I go carnivore with intermittent fasting because there's no sugar within that really. The only sugar that you would probably get is some potential glycogen that is in the muscle of the meat that you're eating, but that'll be like 2 or 3 grams of carb. So it'd be literally negligible. So I think that the thing that I found whenever I have gone through a little carnivore stint is that that cognition is definitely like heightened, clarity of thought, but it comes at a cost, which I found of two costs for me. I think that, and again, I think you come down to the personality side of things. In terms of, actually, I said cost, in terms of a benefit, my ability to modulate my body composition when ketogenic, or if I've ever gone down a carnivore route, is second to none. Like your ability to maintain muscle tissue, your body composition just like flies off you. I look at again, I'm quite genetically predisposed to rheumatoid arthritis. My mum, my nan. When I have like high amounts of refined carb, I get flare-ups, and I feel a lot of joint pain. When I'm ketogenic, or if I've gone down like a little carnivore stint that I've tried out for a bit, there's no joint pain. So within you're not hungry. Your level of cognition is just there. I get through a whole day very easily. You look at my ability to talk, just flows. The exercises that not exercises, but if I'm coaching, if I'm speaking, it doesn't have the same level of like mental taxing. It's not as
Yeah.
taxing. It's easier.
Yeah.
I don't feel fried by the end of the day. So if you're doing a lot of, let's say you're doing a lot of like one-to-many coaching,
Yeah.
to get through the day, and you're not getting through the day, you don't get through it. You continue, and you just really are able to kind of get through it. So I know for myself that, and I think this is how you use these things at a certain period of time. So it's like right now, for example, I've got a 6-week course that starts next week, and I've very much been in launch mode. I've been doing webinars, I've done a lot of kind of speaking gigs, etc. So I've altered my diet to put me in that state. So I've been very, very low carb. I've been doing more intermittent fasting, and even the type of exercise that I've been doing as well has really kind of tied in with that sort of like that season that I'm in. But then after that, I'm actually going to Zimbabwe with my best mate. And yeah, hopefully I come back. But like
What,
there,
was it the guy from Magaluf? Was it the same guy?
No, we'd be going to Ibiza, mate.
Best
No, we'd
mate?
be going to Mykonos. That's where we'd be going. We'd be going to Mykonos. Right, personal joke there. That's so funny. Lenny's actually I know he's a great coach for you guys, but he's actually a Facebook pervert as well. Like
Oh
he really will
yeah,
go.
I know.
Yeah.
Like I creep everyone's Facebook and Instagram. It's all
You went back
happening.
to 2012, mate. 2012. 2012.
What
I
it
was
is.
only a minor back then. Anyway, let's get past that. But yeah, kind of coming back to it, like, I use those sorts of ways of eating to put me in the state that is necessary for what I'm trying to achieve. So the only problem I have with ketogenic and with carnivore, it's not the sustainability side of things because I can make it sustainable. And I think that I don't buy into this that diet's unsustainable. You find a way to make something sustainable. Running a business isn't sustainable. It's
Yeah.
not. Yeah. You have to fucking make it sustainable, and you do that with discipline. And you do that with having a good enough reason. So I don't buy into the bollocks of, oh, it's not sustainable. I'm
Yeah, well, I
like,
mean, like if someone, I get that there's geographical limitations on this, but if someone in some parts of the planet doesn't have access to a certain macronutrient, you can't turn around and say to them how you're eating is unsustainable. They're just like, well, this is it. It's all I got, you know?
yeah, you look at like the Inuit in the
Yeah.
Arctic, they live on fucking seal blubber and caribou.
Yeah, you can't say to them,
Uh,
guys, your dad's unsustainable. Or even, if you flip that, I think there's like a place I remember watching a documentary before, and there's a place I'm almost sure it was like Ethiopia where they don't have basically any protein. So they're growing crops, they're eating sweet potatoes, yams, beans, rice,
Yeah, there's a
all,
tribe
every day.
in Venezuela called the Hadza tribe, and they
Yeah,
eat 150 grams of fiber every day. 150 grams of fiber. They basically chew on like, and you look at the sweet potato that it's not like a sweet potato you'll find. It's like literally almost like eating bark. Like,
yeah,
and they live on that. And like, and again, the human body is adaptable. So, when I hear this, like it's unsustainable, I'm like, a diet is as sustainable as you make it, and you have to like, it's about necessity. So yeah, but the reason why I see it as it's not unsustainable, it's more. My problem is that what it's like when you give a shit about your business so much, you're obsessed with it. And the problem I can find is that it can put me in a bit too much of a focus cave and it can make things a bit too intense for me. Which during a period of time, like when it's launch, when I'm going through that sort of stage, I want that. But do I want that 365 days of the year? No, I think my partner would probably leave me if I was always like that. So again, it's almost like occasionally it's just knowing like, okay, right, I've used that tool for that specific time. So I think that with the carnivore diet, I don't think you can dismiss it. Because, and again, it's the same with like ketogenic diet. For specific individuals, it can legitimately be life changing.
Am I right in saying, Colin, that one is low, one is no? So low carb, no carb, zero
Yeah,
on.
so really the difference is like there's no plant-based stuff really. Well, not necessarily plant-based stuff. You basically have like people think that ketogenic diet is no carb. It's not. You still have carbohydrates in there, but your carbohydrate sources come from vegetables. So it's like a red pepper. It has carbohydrates in it, which effectively is sugar. Whereas the only real sugar, so to speak, that you would probably get from a classical carnivore diet would be whatever sugar is left over in the muscle of the meat that you're eating. Or if you're having like, I know some people have like raw milk and things like that, if there's a bit of like, lactose within that.
Me.
So, and, and again, having been ketogenic, and knowing that feeling and gone through a couple of stints carnivore, I definitely noticed that difference. It's weird. It is weird. In terms of it's like ketogenic takes me, if I kind of look at like standard eating carbs every single day from like an energetic point of view and also like a bloatedness point of view, and then we look at body composition, I would say if I'm having 3 meals a day with some form of slow release carbohydrate, I'm like here. If I go low carb and just drop it to one carb meal per day, I'm here. Ketogenic takes me to here, and then carnivore is like even higher. And I've definitely noticed the difference in terms of a feeling. Definitely.
Yeah. What about the quality of meat that's consumed? I mean, it seems straightforward enough to say that, yeah, obviously, if you're consuming organic meats, it's always going to be better. Like, I suppose that's a no-brainer. And people do talk about the, I've heard people say about generally talking about the quality of the meat, and I'm pretty much convinced that it doesn't really apply to here. Like, I'm like, you're thinking, you're probably hearing propaganda from the US, and you're maybe following people and they're talking about the quality of the meat. But let's face it, some of the stuff that they dish out there is illegal in other countries.
Well, you look at the
Yeah.
ketchup that they sell there versus over here. So I also think, remember, we're not in Ethiopia. So you
Mm.
look at like, so it's like, for example, I went to Vietnam a few years back and we did a cookery course there. And I look at the cow. I remember looking at the cows in Vietnam. They were ill. like they were ill. I then look at the when we went to the meat market,
Yep.
yeah, they didn't have ice. So when I say the meat market, I mean it was literally like tables and
And
just the meat was there. Just the meat was there. There's flies fucking everywhere. It's 35 degrees, like nearly 100% humidity. That's the meat market. So I think the point I'm coming at is exactly that. Like, look, if you can, if you can get grass-fed beef, for example, is there a difference in the quality of the meat? Yeah. Like you look at the fatty acid components of it, you have a higher omega-3 content in grass-fed meat. You have, in terms of the fat profile, you'll have a higher monounsaturated fat content. So yeah, like if you're looking for 0.5% changes in your, your biochemistry, then like, yeah, go down that route. I do agree in terms of the flavor side of things that when you do get a good slab of meat, you can definitely taste it. But if you're a coach and I'm dealing with the Gen Pop who don't have 2 grand a month to pay on to be able to spend on meat, um, just their supermarket fed stuff, supermarket bought stuff in the UK, the quality of our produce is excellent. It
yeah.
is. You only have to go to Europe, look at what you buy in a fucking supermarket, and you're like, what is going on here? You only have to go to the US and you can't like so
We had a few there's been a few farmers come through the ECA certification, and this actual conversation come up one time, and there was a girl on the course and she was vegetarian and everything else, and we were, kind of just asking her out of curiosity, like, what is the reasons? And one of the reasons was she was basically like conditions that animals are kept in, and it just so happened that the guy on the course was a farmer as well, and he was like, hold on a second. He was like, the checks that we get done on us now today versus any other country or any other time in history, he was like, it's insane what farmers have to
Mhm.
do to make sure that they are up to industry standard, the checks, the policies, the procedures. He was like, you can't get away with doing that anymore. It's just not a thing. And so, hearing him
Mhm.
saying that firsthand, like, this is someone that deals and deals with cattle and livestock. It's like,
I think
yeah,
that comes down to where you're sourcing your information from because you can get
yeah,
information from anywhere. It's like, okay, are you basing this off a video you've seen on TikTok? Or you're basing it off. So it's like, for example, the reason why I got into ketogenic diets was because, well, first of all, my mum. My mum actually, I remember when I came out of university, my mum, I remember just seeing like this book lying around and it was just like the art and science of low carb living. And immediately, my mind went, "What a load of bollocks!" I opened it up, I read it by Professor Jeff Volek and Stephen Phinney, and I was like, "That is so good. That makes so much sense." And I went, where on earth did you get this book? Like I'm not being funny. This is like, it's a very, very sciencey book. It's for like academics. I'm like, what the fuck? My mum didn't even go to school. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing reading this? And she's like, oh, your Uncle Sonny gave it to me. So bearing in mind, I said this on your podcast actually. My Uncle Sonny was head of the epilepsy ward at Birmingham Children's Hospital, and now he's head of neurology at the top hospital in Dubai. When he speaks, you listen. And I went, if it's come from him, he's not gonna like, he's not
mm,
gonna dish out some fad. So it's the same with the carnivore. My really good friend, Dr. Dan Maggs, he's got a great YouTube channel actually. He's got about 250,000 subscribers on there as well. And he does really well with it. He started talking to me about a carnivore diet, and because it came from him, I was like, there's some legitimacy in this information. Same with when you're talking about it from like about where meat is kept and how it's done from a farmer. And it's like, okay, I have a trusted source there and I get that. So again, it's who you acquire that information from. I think the thing though, if we kind of look at the meat side of things, looking at it from a protein point of view, you have the argument of the vegetarian versus the protein aspect versus the meat side of things. So it's like, you look at a standard argument vegetarians. And again, I remember, whenever I had a vegetarian or a vegan client, um, I always used to ask, I said, look, are you vegetarian or vegan for ethical purposes or because you feel it is superior from a dietary perspective?
yeah,
If it was ethical, not my job to change their beliefs. Okay.
Yep.
If it's performance, I was like, don't listen to what they said on Game Changers. When you have Arnold Schwarzenegger saying that, like, oh, I now don't eat the steak. I was like, yeah,
Yep.
but when you ate the steak, that's how you got to become Arnold. Like, it's not now.
Yep.
So again, like, if it's from a performance point of view, like animal protein, animal foods just have there is a nutrient profile that you can't get within them. So it's like, again, if I look at one of the big arguments with vegetarians are like, well, if we look at lentils, yeah, if I look at 100 grams of lentils, lentils are actually 22% protein, whereas a chicken breast is only 20% protein. So I'm like, and they're like, okay, the lentils are superior in terms of protein. And I'm like, okay, I get that, I understand that, but you try eating 100 grams of lentils. Like I'm just not going to be able to eat that volume of food. And then also, if I eat 100 grams of lentils, I have a huge amount of carbohydrate in there. So you look at the majority of the protein sources within a vegetarian or a vegan diet, more down the vegan so because again, in vegetarian you can get dairy products.
Yep.
They come with the additional carbohydrate intake, the carbohydrate content. So again, you then look at the amino acid profile. So I remember I did my dissertation at uni, all on amino acid profiles and stimulating protein synthesis. And it was interesting because again, like I remember when I was at uni, everyone used to hate their dissertation. They're like, "Oh, this is a nightmare." I used to stay in the library till like 4 in the morning doing mine. One, because like I'm ADHD and I kind of leave it to the last minute.
Yeah,
But
you were carnivore that week.
yeah, yeah, it was kind of, I don't know what about I was caffeined up. But then also, I was like, I'm legitimately fascinated in acquiring the info to get the answer to these questions. And basically, when you look at protein synthesis, so stimulating muscular growth, really, especially post-exercise, it really comes down to making sure that you have one core amino acid that is present. And it's effectively within the amino acids, you have these things called BCAAs. Now you can supplement with BCAAs, but you're literally pissing your money into the toilet. But if you look at a BCAA, a branched chain amino acid, you have three of them. So you have valine, isoleucine, isoleucine, and leucine. And basically the amino acid leucine in itself is what stimulates protein synthesis post exercise. Specifically, if you can get around 3 grams post exercise, that's where you see superior levels. The problem you have with
Oh, so
vegetarian sources.
sorry, man, so the anabolic window is technically kind of true.
Well, do you know what? I think again, you look at the anabolic window. Some people say it's 10 minutes. Some people say it's 2 hours.
Yeah.
So again, like if I got some protein in post exercise without leucine, and I got protein in post exercise with leucine, what's going to be more beneficial for me? Having the leucine in there. And the problem with vegetarian sources of protein is that they don't have a high level of leucine. You look at one of the main benefits of whey protein. Yes, it gets digested rapidly, but it has a very high leucine content. So if you can, incorporate that within there, that's what really kind of, can elevate your results that way. So yeah, but I'm with you in terms of like the meat side of things. It's like over here in the UK, if I can actually make sure that someone's having a meat-based meal as opposed to solely just a carb-based meal. You look at what most people will have for dinner in the Gen Pop, they'll just have a big bowl of pasta, or they'll have like a big bowl of like super noodles or a big bowl of porridge. There's no protein there. So I'm going like, okay, would I prefer a grass-fed source of protein? Yeah. But if it's gonna be the difference between no protein and a protein source that is just from the supermarket, I'm like, well, it's a very, very obvious and easy answer.
Yeah, I heard even like let's say I'm going to assume that the amino acid profile of eggs is on point, and
Well, you look
uh,
at an egg, it sounds
yeah,
really obvious, but an
pretty fucking
egg,
harmless. Like,
well, you look at an egg is literally a living, breathing, well, it's not living and breathing, but it literally contains everything in there to support life. So do you think
yeah,
it's a good idea to potentially consume that? Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, all right, you'll hear people talk about like free range and chickens and everything else. But going back to the, hearing from farmers who actually here, get your own fucking chickens if you're that worried about it. Get them to, like there's loads of people beside me that have chickens all over the place, and I could actually put some out the back as well. But like everyone beside my house has chickens, and they're getting their own eggs, and the chickens are roaming pretty free out there. I can fucking
Yeah,
see them,
yeah,
so it's
yeah, and I think that like, look, I think it then comes down to I'm gonna be like, I'll be completely honest. If I get my eggs from a proper farm shop, versus the eggs that I get in a supermarket, it tastes differently. It does.
like,
I can do that. But if I'm working with Gen Pop
yep.
and I'm saying like, you gotta go and spend £5 for 6 eggs, they ain't gonna do that. So I'm like, just go and get your Sainsbury's value ones. If it's gonna get them like 30 for £3, if it's gonna get you eating eggs, let's just go and do that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good shout, mate. What has changed in you of late when it comes to nutrition?
Oh yeah, great question. I think really, mate, like I think it has been just again like my food is all around my emotions. I don't mean emotions in terms of like, emotional eating on the sofa, stuffing myself with Dominoes. I mean almost like what I was saying there. I see my food as chemicals. And basically that I am putting specific chemicals in my body to get me into a specific state. So
Mm,
when it's time to go, I'll eat like this, or I won't eat like that. And when it's time to slow, I'll eat like this and I won't eat like that. So I think with that, again, like I kind of mentioned to you that like, we've got if I really want to kind of be more alert, be more creative, be more driven and go, 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 I'm gonna lower my carb content. I'm gonna increase my protein content. I might even go like, through a stint of like the odd few days being carnivore and then just having the odd ketogenic side of things. I'll do that. But then when it's time to almost like, kind of maybe slow down a little bit, I'll incorporate some starchier carbohydrates to just slow me down and knock me out. So again, it's like not seeing that I'm on a specific diet. It's been interesting. I've manipulated my carb intake, not over like a month, but kind of day to day. So it's like,
uh,
yesterday, for example, I had a big day. I had a fair few calls. I delivered a 3 hour seminar. Um, and I felt a bit frazzled by the end of the day because it's been a big few weeks for me. And in the evening, I was like, right, I had some chicken thighs, but then I had some sweet potato, and then I had some rice, and that knocked me out. And I slept very, very deeply. So
mm,
there was that. And I think the other thing, to be honest, as well, I think what has changed for me the last year, it's been alcohol. Um, like I look at alcohol again. I
yeah,
come back to go on,
yeah. For you personally or in general for clients as well?
both. For
Yeah.
me personally, I look at how often I drink now. It's not because of like, oh, I'm prim and proper and I'm a health person. I think that like if I look at like last year, I went 3 months without a drink. I went 3 months not because I was intentionally doing it, but because it doesn't really kind of serve me. It doesn't really kind of add much to my life as much anymore. In specific situations. So no,
Mm,
in most of my life. But when it was my dad's birthday, like it was great to have a beer with my old man. It really, really was. But I think that like if I look at the amount in which I drink, I never used to drink a lot anyway, but I mean like, it's maybe I might have 1 or 2 beers every 2 months or something. And that
mhm,
comes down to just like my energy. That running a business is so important to me. I love it, and I can't do it to the level that I want to when I've had alcohol in me. So I think there's definitely that, 100%. And then the same with clients. Like I always used to really look at alcohol from the perspective of, it suppresses protein synthesis, it drives inflammation, it increases insulin. Physically, it'll really kind of cause your client to screw things up. But the more I've seen it is like the more I've seen alcohol for clients has been around their decision making. that like when they're drinking, they're pressing the fuck it button. When they're drinking, it's I can't be fucked. When they're drinking, they're less likely to want to train. They're more lethargic. They're less likely to want to cook. Their energy levels are lower. And I know it's a big challenge that a lot of clients, a lot of coaches, really do face with their clients around drinking. And I think that this is where, again, we have to, as coaches, like it's how are you positioning the alcohol? Because if you're just telling them like, hey, don't drink that, you're going to put weight on. Um, I don't think it's powerful enough because the problem is the feedback. And again, I look at like why I train, why a specific way. If my sole feedback is looking good, the problem is if I go and nail 10 pints, like I'm not putting weight on. Like I'm not. I'm not going to look any different. So the feedback is I nail 10 pints, nothing negative happens in terms of the result that I'm looking to achieve. Whereas if my sole focus is how I feel from an energetic and an emotional perspective, if I nail 10 pints, my immediate feedback is I feel shit. And
Yeah.
when I take that action, I get that negative outcome. Whereas previously, if it was around, if it was around aesthetics, like it was, I take that action, I don't have a negative outcome, so I'll continue to do it. So, again, like, with exercise, like you look at exercise, if someone goes and does a really high intensity cardiovascular session, they're not going to look different. And they're probably going to feel let down because like I've just busted a gut and they don't look any different. But if the sole focus is on how you feel, exercise is the most potent way to change how you view the world. And automatically it can take it literally takes you from being in a negative mindset to being in a positive mindset. And I think really the secret to I look at happiness. The secret to happiness for me, in my opinion, is spending more time in the positive than in the negative. And it's about having triggers that can take you when you're in that negative space into a positive space. That's what exercise does. That's what journaling does for me. That's what jumping in a freezing cold lake does for me. It takes me out of the negative and puts me into the positive without the wanky, like,
Yeah.
think positive thoughts. It's like, no, I use my physiology to put me in the state that I want to be in, whether that's food, whether that's my sunlight, whether that's just going out in nature, whether it's jumping in a lake, whether it's jumping in, just turning the fucking shower on cold, like whether it's training, all of those things. And I think, again, you look at the profound impact you can have on a client then, like that when you physically see a internal change in this person. They say, you've legitimately changed my life, not because I can now fit in my pants, but because I'm a different person. I'm a better husband. I'm a better wife. I'm a better dad. I'm a better mom. I'm a better friend. And I am happier. You look at it from a business point of view. I remember this is really, really powerful. If you ask any business owner here, and I learned this through a guy called Ed Milet. So remember, I went to Russell Brunson's event in Orlando, and he asked everyone, he said, what business are you in? What business are you in? People are like, oh, financial services, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a mortgage broker or whatever. Okay. He goes, no, you're wrong. You're in the happiness business. Your job is about making someone happy. You look at McDonald's, yeah? What is their number one selling product? The
Yeah.
happy meal. Happy meal. And if you look at what everyone really is actually searching for in life, they're searching for happiness. They are. And think the beauty is us as coaches, we have the ability to actually provide that as a result, but we don't market it that way. Now, I'm not saying get on social media and be like, I'm the happy coach. Like people are literally going to boot you off and be like, no, that is wank. But I mean that when someone comes into your program and they start working with you, if you can position yourself and say, hey, like this is not about you just looking good. You will, okay? But if you focus on how you feel, the aesthetics will take care of themselves. If you can do that, you legitimately have the tools to put someone in that positive state. But the problem is that because they're not searching for that outcome, they are searching solely for the physical change, they're always let down. Whereas if you position it as, look, this is about you seeing the world through a better lens, a happier lens, the quality, because again, I look at from a business point of view, I'm so hot on referrals and word of mouth because I'm literally like people can see a physical change in you, not just how you look, but it's like you've been so different these past 6 months. What has happened? It's like you need to go here. Like this is
Yeah.
where you need to go. And whether that's using the physical tools to do it, whether it's having a community to make people feel part of something, like you could, and I'm not doing this like you can legitimately change the world as a personal trainer, but if you look at what is the big problem really that's going on? Everyone's fucking depressed. Everyone's fucking anxious. And you
Mm.
look at anxiety, that anxiety is simply the presence of adrenaline. It's a buildup of what is adrenaline? It's the body's way of providing you with energy to deal with things and to go and do things. But we don't do anything. So we just have this buildup of fucking energy. It's why you have that pocket of air just like
Yeah,
there.
pent up. Yeah.
Yeah, but go and fucking express it. Go and express it. And I just think that the real I don't like calling it a crisis, but everyone's fucking sad. Everyone is down. And the beauty is that, and I can't remember who I heard this from, but you know that feeling, I think it might have been Huberman, I can't remember, but that feeling of elation and happiness, your body has produced that.
Yeah.
So your
Yeah.
body has the ability to put you into that state. All you need
Yeah.
to do is figure out the way to trigger that.
It's cannabinoids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's actually released into the bloodstream is what's called cannabinoids. So it's like cannabis. So when people experience a runner's high, it's actually, you know, the way people talk about endorphins, it's not, you don't get the high from that. You get it from cannabinoids, which is the
Mm.
same as being high as in like smoking weed. So if you ask someone who, you know, gets a runner's high, what were the symptoms? They'd be like, I lost track of time, I was euphoric, and I was creative. If you ask someone who's smoking weed, the same question, what do they say? Lost track of time, euphoric, creative. It's exactly the same thing, except it's an internal trigger for when you start moving to go, here you go, do more of this.
And do you know what? It's interesting you say it as well because you look at like I look at dopamine, yeah?
Yeah,
Dopamine is the thing to like it's not about like you said there, endorphins, that's not what kind of gives you that high. It's the same with dopamine. People think that dopamine is what makes you feel that pleasure. It's not. Dopamine
yeah,
is about motivation. It's about
yeah,
moving towards something. Now,
yeah,
what's really interesting, if you look at people wait for the motivation, they wait for motivation. You can't wait for fucking dopamine. Like, I mean, you can, but it ain't going to happen. But the thing is, in order for you to move, and it's partly how caffeine works as well. So caffeine increases physical performance because it increases dopamine. Not the only way, but it increases dopamine. But dopamine is responsible for movement. So in order for me to move my arm, I require dopamine, which means in order for me to actually be motivated and get myself into the motivated state, I have to do something. So it's that
yeah,
action leads to inspiration. It does because action leads to the production of the neurotransmitter that makes you motivated. And then what happens is that it makes you motivated. That dopamine then gets converted into adrenaline, and that adrenaline is the energy to go and do it. So it's almost like you look at the dopamine side of things. Dopamine is the motivation to go and do something. It then gets converted into the adrenaline, which is the energy to go and make that specific thing happen. So again, if it's within your business right now, like if you're procrastinating like hell and you're doing it, like you're not doing anything, you're just kind of sitting around doing fuck all, move. Like move, just do something. Like how many times have we had that conversation? Like,
yeah,
just do
yeah,
something, mate. Just do
yeah,
something.
fucking do something.
But sitting
No,
around like with your fucking dick in your hand all day, like it ain't gonna do anything, is it?
yeah, well, I mean,
Well, yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
Callum, you're a legend, mate. Let's wrap this up. Always very, very, very insightful, and we'll do more of these. Let's do
Yeah,
more of
we
these.
should, mate.
Yeah, it's always insightful. But yeah, as I was saying, for the rest of the guys in the group, I'm back doing these live at 11s. They get cut last year because, quite frankly, last year was chaos, and the trainings and a lot of the stuff that I do for free. This just goes into the community for free. Had to get put to the side because there was, quite frankly, just paid things that I needed to prioritize. So, we're back at it now, and let's do this more.
Hey, man. Thank you so much for having me, mate.
Legend, Colin. Thank you, mate.